Hey everyone, Jimmy here. Now, are you looking at getting yourself a pair of binoculars? Well, here's my 6 top tips for making sure you spend your money wisely. So, tip number 1, what do you want to use your binoculars for? That might sound like a silly question, really, but it may be that you're not just into watching wildlife. It may be you enjoy walking, and that could be walking quite long distances as well. And so you don't want a big, heavy, bulky pair of binoculars around your neck. It may also be that you've got small children and you want them to be able to use the binoculars as well. And so again, size is really important. So I think the first thing that's really important is have a think about exactly all the different things you're going to be using your binoculars for, and that's going to help you put yourself in a good place for which ones might be the best to buy. So the first point I made was regarding what do you want the binoculars for? And for me, I like to do a lot of walking and getting about, and so that's why I chose a smaller pair of binoculars. It might be for you that you just want a pair of binoculars that you are going to have on the windowsill at home. So again, you wouldn't need a big pair of binoculars. A good friend of mine went for a big pair of 12 by 56 binoculars. Now, I'd say they're too big for a lot of people. But they worked for him because he bought a high-end pair, so they were quite light in weight. It might be that you've got kids as well that you want to use the binoculars for, and so just really have a think about what you really want your binoculars to be for. You can get smaller binoculars than this that pack right down and you can stuff into a jacket pocket, and then when you're out walking in the hills or you've got them in a glove box in your car, they're really handy to use. And of course, what you want them for will probably dictate on how much money you spend as well. Tip number 2, how much are you going to spend? Now, sometimes this can be a difficult question, but I think we all like to imagine, or certainly I do, that I'm going to buy those really big, fancy, posh binoculars, sitting on the shelf for, mega money. But that's not always possible. We all have different budgets, and believe it or not, you can buy some fantastically good binoculars for well under £200 nowadays. So along with the rest of these tips, have a think about what your budget is before you go out there and spend your money. So tip 2 was budget. And I'll use myself as an example. I think I did anyway. But in the past, of course, I use my binoculars quite extensively for work. And to be honest with you, I'm very rarely away from my binoculars, certainly in the monitoring season. So I've always tried to get as best as I can and afford. And normally what you'll find is in the binocular world nowadays, there's 3 or 4 big brands out there at the high end. So you've got your Swarovski, your Zeiss, your Leica, and then Cower are an incredibly good make as well. So I've always tried to opt for them, but you don't have to. There's some incredible binocular companies out there that make incredible optics, and there's going to be a multitude of things that I talk about in these tips that are going to dictate how much you spend. But what I would say is the most important thing is if you've got a budget, stick to it. We've all been there, me especially. It's very easy to put something on PayPal credit or on a credit card or something like that, or you go into a shop and a salesperson talks you into spending that extra £100 that you don't really want to spend, and it makes things a little bit tighter for you that month. So pick a budget, do your research on the brands that suit that budget as well, and stick to it. Don't be tempted to go over it, because don't forget, you can always trade your binoculars in and get another pair at a later date, maybe when you can afford a better pair. But as I say, the binocular market now is so incredible. What you can get for under 500, 300, 200 quid is incredibly good. So set your budget and stick to it. So tip number 3 is durability and longevity. So really, most binoculars nowadays that you buy are pretty well made. They're covered in armoured casing, they're normally nitrogen filled so they don't fog up, but you want to make sure that you do a little bit of research and you're buying from a brand that is, you know, has been making binoculars for a while. Also, most binoculars come with a decent carry strap and case that you can put them with, and also eye cups to protect the all-important lenses. So make sure that the pair that you're buying come with the appropriate equipment that you might need to keep them nice and safe. So tip 3, durability and longevity. Now, if you're going to be spending a decent amount of money, you know, on a pair of binoculars, then you're going to want something that's going to last, and is durable as well. Of course, where most people are using these things outdoors, you're in a bird hide, you're putting them down on the side, you're picking them up, you know, trust me, I'll never forget the time when I had my first really nice pair of Swarovski binoculars and I was on a game drive. If anyone's been on a game drive, you're in the back of a Land Rover, and I dropped them off the bench of the Land Rover onto the metal floor, and honestly, the rest of the day, I was like a bear of a sore head, needless to say. But luckily, there wasn't too much damage. But that's because a lot of binoculars nowadays come in these rubber housing. You know, they're pretty well made nowadays, and it's definitely true what they say. Going back to the last tip on budget, is that a lot of the time with optics you do get what you pay for, so do a little bit of research. And there's some standard things as well that should come with binoculars. So a lot of them come with warranty, and a lot of the warranty as well lasts a long time. You know, some of them are 10 plus years, so have a look at that with your manufacturer that you're buying from. And also the good thing is, and worth bearing in mind, is a lot of optics companies have factories or workshops in the UK, or where you can send them back to be repaired. So I've done that before, and I've even sent binoculars back to be serviced, and it's not crazy expensive. You know, you can get parts like the eye cups replaced. So look into that as well, and make sure you take that into account. But basically, you want a nice sturdy pair of binoculars, nitrogen filled, so basically if they shouldn't get fog inside them or dirt, hopefully, and as well as that, they're nice and light and easy to use. So yeah, do a bit of research and that'll stand you in good stead for durability and longevity of binoculars. Okay, tip 4. Now you might have thought this would have come up a bit sooner, but that is magnification. So there's lots of numbers involved with binoculars, but for most people that are interested in wildlife and bird watching, you're going to be looking for a pair of binoculars that are around about 8 by 42 or 10 by 42. Now, what do those numbers mean? Well, put simply, if we look at this pair of binoculars that I've got here, these are actually an 8 by 33. And so it means they're 8 times magnification, and this part here is 33 millimeters in diameter. Obviously the lens here at the front lets in light. The 8 times is the number of magnification I'm going to get for looking at a bird in the distance. Now I like 8 by 33s, the slightly smaller ones, because I do lots of walking, so I don't want a big heavy bulky pair of binoculars. And of course, if I'm looking at anything much longer distance, then I just get my scope out and use that one. So tip number 4 was magnification, and I've already mentioned it a bit earlier about a friend of mine who was quite specific in his requirements. He went for a big pair of 12 by 56 Swarovski binoculars, but because they were Swarovski binoculars, I'll never forget when I had a go at using them, and I thought, oh, why have you bought such a big pair of binoculars? They were incredibly light for their size. One of the things people might say to you when you get up into the sizes of binoculars, so I'd say these are 8 by 32, so these are a sort of a smaller pair of size, so it's 8 times magnification by 33 millimeter across there. Obviously my friends would have been 12 times magnification by 56 millimeters across there, so lets in a lot more light and much better magnification. But the reason I tend to go for these smaller ones is because I do a lot of walking, as I said. I do a lot of moving about, so I don't want a big heavy pair of binoculars on me.
If you're going for the really high-end pair, then you probably can get the 10 by 42s or the 12 by 56. But when you start to go into that range with the sort of the lower priced models, then they can be quite bulky and quite heavy. I'm not talking about the days of where your granddad gave you a pair of binoculars. We've all been there, and you get them big massive pair of sort of sailors sort of on a ship type sort of binoculars. But you want something that's gonna work for you. Now, one of the things people say is the higher the magnification, the more shake you might get with your binoculars. Now, that varies for everyone. I can sometimes shake using these smaller ones, and I have to rest my arms on a gate to keep them steady. So it doesn't necessarily mean because of the magnification of the binoculars. And don't forget, some binoculars have a little adapter in there, although you can pull this out and screw it onto an adapter that can sit on a tripod as well, so they almost become like a scope. So you can get round these things as well. But yeah, have a look at the size, the magnification. There are tons of reviews. I mean, I'm no expert really. I'm just going off me using binoculars myself and what I've read when I've researched them. But there are tons of reviews out there. I can guarantee you, if there's a make or a brand or a type of binocular from that brand that you want to try, there'll be someone out there that's much more geeky than me on binoculars that will have written a review. So again, Google's your sort of friend. Have a look. There'll be YouTube videos as well. Check them out. And you'll be able to work out what's the best magnification and size for you.
Tip number 5. Now, something that is really, really important nowadays is have a look at pre-loved. There are so many binoculars out there nowadays that, you know, someone has bought, they don't like them, or they want to upgrade, and so they put their old binoculars on pre-loved. And you can literally buy any pair of binoculars from any brand, usually on pre-loved, whether that's eBay, Vinted, or going into your local binocular shop, you will be able to source a decent pair of pre-loved binoculars. The ethical side of things is, and this is something that's been more for me nowadays, is I don't really want to use binoculars that are used by hunting outfits. A lot of the binocular and the optic companies, their main market is the hunting and big game hunting market, and I don't particularly want to. My preference is not to use binoculars that are used for that.
So tip number 5 was one of my favourite things really, and that's pre-loved. Everyone wants a deal nowadays, and so for me really, when it comes to binoculars, in fact anything really, the phone that this is being recorded on will have I'd have probably bought second or third hand, but yeah, like any sort of consumable goods nowadays, is people trade them in all the time. People replace them. So I use these binoculars as an example, but I'm actually trying to remember the last time I bought a pair of binoculars brand new. In fact, I don't think I did. Like I said before, because a lot of them come with really good warranty, and because people are upgrading their binoculars all the time, then really, like these for instance, these are literally brand new when I got them, and they were pretty much half price on what the binoculars would normally cost. So yeah, pre-loved is a really good thing to go for. Sorry, Emma's trying to keep up with me because there's a puddle there. Should we walk along? I'll walk through this puddle here. The joys of I'll get in trouble with the wife for making a walk through a puddle there. Yeah, so pre-loved. There's so many shops, and in fact most binocular and optic shops will have a big pre-loved department. So yeah, now the other reason I love pre-loved is because it's good for the environment as well. You know, I remember having a conversation with Titch from Focal Points, where I get a lot of help, and I work with them when it comes to optics, is that he was explaining to me the amount of water, for instance, that it used in order to make the glass smooth. and perfect for the binoculars. So if you imagine how many binoculars are being put out there, you know, a factory using that, then of course there's that environmental impact as well. So yeah, I don't think you can really beat buying pre-loved. You don't need to buy brand new really, yeah, even though these will last you a long time, yeah, I don't think you can beat it. So pre-loved. Oh, there's one other thing as well that I mentioned that I can't miss out as well, talking about the ethics of it, and that is, and this is obviously very dependent on who you are, and what your morals and your ethics are. But I made a conscious decision sort of the last 2-3 years of where I wanted to get my optics from, because of course most optic companies have a strong link to hunting, shooting, might be big game hunting out in Africa. Now, I'm not going to get into a debate on that, whether you agree with it or not, but for me, I didn't want to start using, or I wanted to stop using, sorry, optics that were supplied or used or even made by a company that is heavily involved in the hunting industry, and that's why I went with Cower. There's very good companies like Opticron, which is also a UK brand as well, and Viking as well are another good one. There is, of course, a load of work that's been done on the ethics and the morals behind optics and binoculars, and I'll put a link down below to the latest one of them for you. But yeah, I think that's something that people probably should bear in mind a lot more, not just when it comes to optics, when it comes to everything really.
Tip number 6, and I've saved this one to last because I think it is the most critical thing, and that is try before you buy. Most of us have the opportunity to go to a binocular shop, maybe a fair that's offering these optics, or a nature reserve. Most nature reserves nowadays have shops that are selling optics. Even if you've got no intention of buying them, you can't beat getting a pair of binoculars in your hands and trying them before you buy them. It's well worth it, and I think it really increases the value of the binoculars that you end up buying.
So the very last tip, and probably the most important, if not really on a par with the 5th tip, the ethics and the pre-loved, is try before you buy. We've mentioned, or I've mentioned, about how there's so many pre-loved offerings out there with optic shops. Go along to your local optic shop if you've got one nearby. A lot of camera stores as well sell optics, but to be honest with you, most nature reserves now have optic shops within them where you can go and try. Now, I said try before you buy, but of course there's nothing that says you have to buy them. There's nothing wrong with going and getting your hands on some different types of binoculars just to see what they feel like, get used to the magnifications, you know, how they feel in the hand, what they feel like round your neck. Most places will let you take them outside, obviously, so you can have a play with them as well and use them in a real scenario, in a real environment. And it can be as simple as, once upon a time, I used to be really into what were called open bridge binoculars. So basically, they didn't have this bridge here, they had 2 bridges, and I used to be able to get my fingers in between them, and they felt much more comfortable in the hand for me. I've got quite big hands on these ones here, but I've got used to it with these, and also Cower don't do open bridge ones, so I didn't have much of a choice. But it's daft, simple things like that you might find are, you know, what is the yes or the no for that pair of binoculars for you. And as I say, there's loads of opportunities. If you're feeling really brave as well, then when you're in a bird hide, why don't you just give someone a tap on the shoulder and say, excuse me, do you mind if I have a go of your binoculars, and get talking to them. Most birders, as long as they're not about to spot their greatest twitch of the year, will more than happily talk to people about their optics and what they like and so on and so forth. And to be honest with you, most optic shops that I've been to and companies, they're not normally in it for the hard sell as well. So I wouldn't worry too much about, you know, going to an optic shop and having all these different products shoved down your throat, you know, and as I say, you're being forced to sort of buy one. Don't be afraid to go along just to have a test and a try, and I guarantee you it will make your money, or the money that you spend on a pair of binoculars, go a lot further. So there you go, that's 6 top tips on binoculars from me, and what better way to cap it off than standing here. We've just got pretty much to the end of the walk, and our local pair of little owls, or one of them anyway, is sat in the entrance of his hole. That's what you need a pair of binoculars for.